James and I grew up together. After we got engaged, he secretly planned a trip abroad with Mia, the woman he had secretly adored for years. The day before our departure, he was at a golf course lounge, chatting with his friends and Mia. "You just got engaged, and you're already taking Mia out? Aren't you worried Olivia will find out?" one of his friends asked. James smirked. "I hired a man to pretend to be her admirer. He'll keep her busy so she won't have time to notice me. And if something really happens between them, I'll just conveniently call off the engagement and be with Mia without any issues." I trembled upon hearing those words from outside the door. I turned to the man behind me, his handsome face filled with guilt. Tears streamed down my face as I whispered, "Then let's just fulfill his wish and get married." But as I was preparing for the wedding, James knelt in front of me, pain in his voice. "Olivia, I was wrong. Please don't marry him." As I read the message from the wedding planner, I hesitated, unsure if I should really change my wedding plans. Just then, James returned, suitcase in hand. He opened the door, walked into the living room, and impatiently shouted, "I'm starving. Olivia, come out and make me something to eat." James's voice was harsh, and I frowned as I quickly turned off my phone and rushed to the kitchen to prepare him some noodles. But when I brought the bowl to him, he didn't even touch it. Instead, his eyes studied my face, as if probing. "While I was gone, did you meet someone else?" His words made my heart skip a beat. I immediately remembered what he had said in that private room at the bar. A painful, suffocating ache tightened in my chest. I knew he was referring to Leo, the man he had hired to pretend to pursue me. Maybe Leo would end up as my groom at my wedding in a month. I forced a calm expression, looked him in the eye, and answered, "No." James looked at me with a hint of doubt in his eyes. He studied me for a long time, then muttered, "Could it be that man got paid and didn't do his job?" "Huh? What are you talking about?" James quickly changed the subject, flustered. "Nothing. This noodle is really good, though." After scarfing it down, he wiped his mouth and gave me an order, as if entitled. "Make some seafood porridge. I need to take it with me to eat later." Seeing me sitting still, he frowned and opened his suitcase, tossing a small blue velvet jewelry box in front of me. "Here, I bought this for you while I was away. Don't lose it, it's expensive. Now, can you go make the porridge?" I opened the box and found a pair of tiny diamond earrings, barely the size of rice grains. Before I could close the box, James impatiently grabbed me by the arm, yanked me out of my chair, and pushed me toward the kitchen. "Hurry up, I have things to do later," he said. "If the other party decides not to sign the contract because of the delay, the company's loss won't be something you can handle." Since James's company had gotten on track, he'd been saying things like this to scare me. I watched the shrimp boiling in the pot, a wave of sourness rising in my chest. How laughable that someone who's allergic to seafood would now be making seafood porridge. When I handed him the thermos with the porridge, he looked at it with disdain. "What took you so long?" he grumbled, then quickly left through the door without even looking back. I stared at the burn on my wrist, a bitter smile creeping up on my face. I was about to find the first aid kit when I accidentally saw a receipt on top of his open suitcase. It was for a $2 million diamond necklace, with a note clearly stating that the earrings I received were a free gift. I looked at the receipt, my fingers slowly curling into a fist. The bitterness inside me grew, so sharp I couldn't even feel the pain in my wrist anymore. I opened my phone to distract myself and happened to see a new post from Mia. She was holding a bowl of seafood porridge, smiling happily at the camera. The diamond necklace she wore was unmistakably visible. The caption read, "Food from my beloved is even better than the rarest delicacies." I looked up at the picture on the wall, taken at our engagement party. Tears streamed down my face. "James, being by your side is so painful." James, who lived in the villa next door, had grown up with me. He was handsome and smart, always ranked first in our grade. As a child, I admired him greatly, especially since I was always the one falling behind. In our senior year of high school, I studied day and night, determined to get into the same university as him. Finally, on the day of our graduation, I mustered up the courage to confess to him. He was drunk, his gaze lingering on me for a long while. Just when I thought he would reject me, he said, "Okay, let's date now." Before I could even process it, he pulled me into his arms, his warm lips pressing against mine, and I was instantly lost in the kiss. Because of that kiss, even when James rejected his family's help and rented a basement apartment, I willingly stayed by his side, enduring hardship. During his startup phase, some mutual friends advised me, James likes someone else. He's just passing time with you, don't let yourself get hurt. But I didn't believe them. I put my heart into it, hoping that the years of companionship would earn me his real love. In the end, I lost that bet. On the day of our engagement party, after James received a message from Mia, he immediately left without saying a word. He left me, who was on stage toasting the guests, without a second glance. I could feel the sympathy in the eyes of the people around me as I held back tears, saying, he had an urgent matter at the company. When I got home and sat down, I couldn't help but stare at his new Instagram post all night. A pair of intertwined hands in the photo burned my eyes with their painful truth. Since then, James's comings and goings became more and more unpredictable. After showering, he'd go straight to the study. I stood outside the door, clearly hearing laughter from within. I pretended not to notice and asked James what he was doing in the study all night. He shot me an annoyed look and said coldly, "You're too dumb to understand, so don't ask about my business anymore." Those words sank deep into my heart, and my mood grew even darker. As I was chopping vegetables, I absent-mindedly cut my finger. Looking at the deep wound, James had no choice but to leave his study and take me to the hospital for stitches. When I opened the passenger door, I saw a bunch of stuffed toys and cute stickers in the car. My nose twitched, and suddenly I remembered the soft keychain I had left in the car once. He had seen it and immediately thrown it in the trash in disgust. Seeing me looking at him now, he quickly moved the toys to the back seat and said, "Now you can get in." I tried to ignore the sickly sweet scent of the stuffed animals and was about to get in when his phone rang suddenly. "Are you hurt? I'll come over right now." He frowned and looked at me. "Go to the hospital yourself. I have something to take care of." I watched the car disappear quickly from my sight, and suddenly, my eyes stung with pain. After the treatment, I unexpectedly saw a post from a mutual friend on Instagram. I used the location tag and found the golf course. Inside the private room, James had Mia in his arms, and the tenderness in his eyes was something I'd never seen before. Before I could even feel sad, I heard him say something in the lounge. The stranger James had hired was standing right behind me. He looked at me with concern in his eyes. "Don't be sad." James didn't come home again that night. The next morning, as dawn broke, the vibrating sound of my phone woke me up from my sleep. As soon as I answered, James's commanding voice came through the phone. "Make a few of your best dishes right now, and deliver them to the address I sent you before noon." Before I could speak, James quickly hung up the phone. I stared at the storm outside, and while driving, I nearly had an accident multiple times due to the blurry visibility. After buying the ingredients, I didn't stop, hurriedly cooking 4 dishes and packing them into thermal boxes. When I finally arrived at the hotel room James had sent me, drenched in sweat, and knocked on the door, it was Mia who answered. She was wearing a bathrobe, and her neck was covered in red marks from a night of indulgence. Mia smiled brightly as she took the thermal box. "You must be Olivia, right? James said you're a great cook. Thank you for bringing food for me." She kept sizing me up. "Your cooking skills are really impressive." "I'm such a fool, I tried to make James dinner last night, but I cut my finger with a knife." Mia held up the finger wrapped in a band-aid and waved it in front of me. "He's so worried about me, he wouldn't let me cook anymore. He said we have a maid who can bring me food whenever I need it." "That must be you, right?" Her obvious provocation pushed me to the edge. I snatched the thermal box out of her hand, and when Mia tried to stop me, she realized she couldn't overpower me. Suddenly, she bent down and bit my hand. The pain from her teeth sinking into my flesh made me immediately release the box. The thermal box fell to the ground, and the food scattered everywhere. Some of the food even splashed onto her legs. When she felt the grease on her legs, she quickly let go and screamed in panic. Hearing Mia scream, James rushed out of the room. Bare-chested, he anxiously pulled Mia into his arms and asked, "What happened?" The tenderness in his eyes was something I had never seen in all the years we'd been together. Mia didn't say anything. She pointed at me and pretended to be scared, hiding in James's embrace. James frowned and, in a loud voice, demanded, "What did you do to Mia?" "I only asked you to bring over some food." how did you end up causing the scene? If Mia's finger hadn't been cut 5 millimeters yesterday, I wouldn't have let you come. I defended myself, feeling wronged. She bit me first. I raised my hand, which was bleeding from where Mia had bitten me, but James became even more impatient. It's just a little blood. How can that compare to Mia's finger? Mia is always so kind and gentle. If I find out you've bullied her again, I'll cancel the engagement immediately. James coldly tried to close the door, but I quickly stepped forward and shoved my hand into the gap. James yelled, "Do you want to lose your hand?" I ignored the fury on his face and bluntly asked, "Are you cheating on me right in front of me?" As soon as I said this, panic flashed across his face. James faltered, "What nonsense are you talking about? I'm just taking care of an old friend." He pushed my hand away and, without hesitation, slammed the door shut. I stood there, dazed, outside the hotel room. When I finally returned home, exhausted, my phone rang. It was James's mother. "Don't forget, you and James need to attend your grandmother's birthday banquet in 3 days." I suppressed the pain in my heart and replied, "Okay." Attending the banquet as his fiancé would be the last thing I'd do for his family. Once the birthday celebration was over, I would leave. On the day of the banquet, many guests arrived at the old mansion. As James and his father's reputation in the business world grew, almost everyone who wanted to make connections showed up at the event. After some grooming, Mia looked young and beautiful, and the white dress made her appear even more gentle and lovely. James, standing beside her, had his arm around her waist, and the two of them toasted guests like a married couple. I stared at the pair, standing on the stage like a perfect match. My heart felt like it was being gripped tightly by a large hand, unable to breathe. A servant, noticing my sour expression, hurried over and respectfully said, "Mississippi." The lively chatter among the guests suddenly quieted down. They looked at me and the couple in the center of the room with curious gazes. Whispers started behind me. "So she's the fiancé, huh? And the one standing there? Shoo, don't talk about these things. It's dangerous to offend them." I clenched my fists at my sides, and when James's gaze fell on me, I forced a dignified smile. But instead of pulling back, James's behavior became even more reckless. In front of all the guests, he casually took Mia's hand and walked up to me. "You're so late. Don't even have the awareness of being a fiancé. If you can't be a proper daughter-in-law, just step aside and let someone else take your place." Although James didn't mention Mia's name explicitly, it was obvious to anyone that the person he was interested in was the woman in his arms. James frowned and gave me a look of disdain. "I honestly wonder if I was out of my mind back then, to ever be with you. You've really lowered my standards." As soon as he said that, the guests looked at me with strange eyes, and I could hear soft murmurs behind me. James ignored the redness in my face, his gaze soft as he looked at Mia. He wrapped his arm around Mia's waist and loudly announced to the guests, "My engagement to Olivia was never something I wanted. The one I truly love is someone else." He bent down and lightly kissed Mia on the lips, before continuing, "I hope everyone will take care of Mia in the future." I stood there, watching the two of them at the center of the room, as if I was being drenched in cold water, trembling uncontrollably. I felt like a joke, being laughed at and trampled on by everyone here. My face went pale, and my heart turned to ash as I listened to these words. In that moment, all the love I'd held for James over the years instantly shattered, disappearing without a trace. I tightly clenched the fist hanging by my side, trying to appear calm, and walked up to James. In front of all the guests, I said firmly, "Let's call off the engagement." As soon as I finished speaking, James froze for a moment, then sneered, "Are you serious? Don't come crying to me later when you regret it." I shook my head. "I will never regret it." I took off the jade bracelet, a family heirloom passed down to the daughter-in-law, from my wrist and handed it to Mia. "This will be yours from now on." James looked at Mia's wrist, his expression darkening. "Have you really thought this through? Even if you beg me on your knees to take you back, I won't agree." I kept a blank face. "Fine, I understand. Don't worry, I won't trouble you anymore." I quickly turned around, not even looking back as I prepared to leave. But James' mocking voice came again from behind me. "Just wait and see. I know her too well. She'll beg for my forgiveness within 3 days." I froze at those words. Then, I pulled out my phone and dialed the number that wasn't saved in my contacts. "Would you marry me?" The other side was silent for a long time, no response. Just when I thought he was going to refuse, he suddenly spoke. "All right, let's get married." It was Leo, the man James had hired to pretend to be interested in me. Leo spoke softly, "I'll come pick you up tomorrow." I thought he was joking, but to my surprise, the doorbell rang early the next morning. When I opened the door, still rubbing my swollen eyes from crying, Leo was standing there, dressed sharply. Seeing his face, I suddenly wanted to ask how much James had paid him for this role, given his looks. Seeing my grim expression, a hint of pity flashed in Leo's eyes. "Are you crying over him?" I forced a smile. "No, it was just dust in my eyes." I was about to ask what he needed when, with a resigned expression tinged with affection, he said, "Didn't we agree? I'm here to pick you up. We're getting married soon. As a man, I can't let you handle everything for the wedding on your own. You shouldn't even be taking solo wedding photos by yourself." Hearing the word wedding, my lips trembled. Leo saw me standing there, motionless, and patiently guided me to the bathroom to help me wash up. By the time I came to, I was already dressed and ready, standing at the door. Leo was half squatting in front of me, zipping up my dress like he was taking care of a child. His patience rivaled that of my mother. At the same time, he noticed the suitcase in the living room. He cautiously asked, "Are you moving out?" "Yes, I've already found a new place." For some reason, when I said that, I saw a slight look of joy on Leo's face. On the way to the bridal shop, Leo offered to drive. The shop assistant greeted me with a big smile when I entered. "Miss Olivia, welcome." But when her eyes shifted to Leo, her smile faltered for a second. "And this is?" "He's my fiancé," I replied. Then Mr. James?" "I've broken up with him." I clenched the hand by my side, trying to appear calm. "You can contact him for anything related to the wedding from now on." Just as I finished speaking, a familiar voice came from inside the shop. "Do you have any new wedding dresses?" Mia asked, dragging a massive skirt behind her as she walked out. Behind her was James, the man I had broken up with the night before. Now, I finally understood the complex smile on the assistant's face. When James saw us in the bridal shop, he froze for a moment, then a smug grin appeared on his face. "You're already regretting it after just one night, huh? You even followed me to the bridal shop. I warned you that breaking up would be easy, but getting back together would never be that simple." Seeing me standing silently, James arrogantly continued, "Today's Mia's birthday. I came here with her to take some wedding photos, to fulfill her wish. Don't make a scene and embarrass yourself." At those words, my gaze changed. When I first got together with James, his handsome face and wealthy background often attracted women who threw themselves at him. I used to argue with him over these things all the time. But now, having given up on him, I just coldly watched him ramble on. "Are you done? I'm about to take wedding photos with my fiancé. Please move aside." James looked at me in disbelief. "Fiancé?" James suddenly burst out laughing. "Ever since you've been with me, no other man has appeared in your life, except for..." I looked at James, who was about to slip up, and asked, "Except for what?" "Nothing." He paused awkwardly, then continued, "Olivia, you're so dumb. You lie without thinking." I stared at him, trying to read his intentions. Without hesitation, I hugged Leo's waist. I slowly stood on tiptoe and pressed my lips to his. "This is my fiancé. Please step aside, don't waste our time here." James' eyes widened in anger. He yanked my arm and shouted, "You're cheating on me right in front of me?" I stared him down defiantly. "We'd broken up. Who I'm with now is none of your business. And as for who's cheating, anyone with eyes can see," I said, looking pointedly at Mia. James retorted, "A man of my status always has a few women around. Mia is gentle and considerate, I'd be a fool not to marry her." I sneered. "Fine, I'll break up with you. That way, you and she can be together openly." I forcefully pulled my arm from James' grip and said to the assistant, "Quick, get me the latest wedding dress to try on. I'm too busy to waste time here." As I was about to go upstairs to choose a wedding dress with Leo, James suddenly blocked my path with a long stride. "I'm giving you one last chance. Let go of his hand, come to me right now, and I'll forgive you and let you stay as my fiancé. I coldly replied, thanks, but I don't need it. James was so enraged, he was breathing heavily. When he tried to pull me again, Leo instantly stepped in front of me. His cold, deep voice echoed, Mr. James, please stay away from my fiancé. Otherwise, I won't be so polite. Seeing James sneer at him, Leo calmly continued, your company is having issues with our family's partnership. My family values how much their partners care about family, and I don't think you'd want them to find out about your affair with another woman. James gritted his teeth and spoke. He unwillingly glanced at me, took a deep breath, and then said, after all these years together, are you really going to just walk away so easily? Before he could finish, Mia, who had been standing next to him the entire time, suddenly clutched her chest and collapsed into his arms. With a fragile look in her eyes, she gazed up at him and said, my chest hurts so much. Please, take me away from here. James hesitated and looked at me. Mia caught the glance he threw in my direction, and then let out a pained cry, stifling her voice. Without another moment's hesitation, James scooped her up in his arms and quickly strode out of the bridal shop. As they were about to disappear from view, Mia shot me a look filled with resentment and unwillingness. I stared back at her, silently mouthing, he's mine. Leo, noticing her lips move, immediately stepped in front of me to shield me. I glanced down at his hand, gripping my arm, and felt an inexplicable sense of safety. After we finished taking the wedding photos, the cool night sky hung above us, the moon already high. Leo drove me straight back to the villa. Once the car stopped, I voiced a question that had been on my mind, is that the company you mentioned earlier? Leo smiled. That's the company my grandfather founded. His words left me stunned, my eyes wide in disbelief. So, the man James casually brought in has such a prominent background. I couldn't help but wonder what James would think if he knew Leo's true identity. As I opened the car door and was about to get out, Leo grabbed my hand. Olivia, it's still not too late. How about I help you move to your new place now? I glanced at the dimly lit villa, remembering the loneliness of living here alone. After a brief moment of thought, I nodded in agreement. But as soon as I opened the door, a cold voice laced with anger rang out from the couch, you've finally decided to come back so late. James was sitting in the dark living room, his icy tone sending a chill down my spine. James stood up quickly from the sofa, walking swiftly to me. Are you really this unwilling to let go of him? Did you find some man to show up in front of me and make me jealous on purpose? Do you find this amusing? He took another step closer, advancing relentlessly. Even though my back was pressed against the wall, and there was nowhere left to retreat, his presence only felt more suffocating. James reached out, trapping me in the narrow space between us. He lowered his head, his eyes dark with intensity, as he stared down at me. I'm giving you one last chance. If you apologize, I'll still allow you to be my fiancé. I met his eyes with coldness. James, was I not clear enough before? We'd broken up, and I don't want to see you again. This is the last time I'm ever coming to this house, and I'm only here to pick up my things. My fiancé is waiting for me outside, so don't waste my time. James smirked, his lips curling upward. You think I'll believe your lies? Isn't all this just a game to make me chase after you? I see through your little act already. Stop playing it. My patience is running thin. James's body was so close that I could feel his breath on me. Such intimate gestures were once something I longed for on countless nights. But now, with his warmth so near, all I felt was disgust. I frowned and looked at him. You really are a strange person. Didn't you used to dream of me leaving you? I locked my gaze with his, speaking coldly, the things you said that day, in the golf lounge with Mia, I heard everything. The man you saw today? He's just someone you hired to pretend to pursue me. I've already decided to marry him. So now you don't need to keep spending money to get rid of me, and you can be with the person you truly love. Why won't you just let me go? Isn't this exactly what you wanted? James's face shifted, panic and confusion flashing in his eyes, but he kept pressing his body closer against me. He tried to cover my mouth, as if stopping me from speaking would ease his mind. Just as I felt my breath getting shallow, the crystal chandelier in the center of the living room flickered to life. Mia stood at the top of the stairs, furiously shouting, "What do you think you're doing?" Hearing her shout, James instinctively pulled away from me, his grip loosening. Mia stormed down the stairs, seething with anger. Olivia, I didn't expect you to look so innocent while you're stealing other women's men. You already broke up with James, so why come back here? She raised her hand, aiming to slap me across the face. I quickly grabbed her wrist with one hand, and with the other, slapped her hard across the face. Her pale cheeks immediately turned red and swollen. I looked at her with a neutral expression. This is your punishment for seducing my ex-fiancé and betraying me. Ignoring her stunned gaze, I grabbed my suitcase and walked away without looking back. As I stepped out of the villa, I heard her whine to James behind me. She slapped me so hard. You need to stop her and make her pay me back for this. I snorted in amusement, but when I reached the car, James was nowhere to be seen. Leo, waiting in the driver's seat, quickly took my suitcase and placed it in the trunk. I looked at his handsome face and said, Leo, it's not too late to back out now. Leo's gaze was firm. No, I will never regret this. Since moving back to the house I bought right after graduation, James has been constantly calling and texting me. When he becomes too annoying, I occasionally glance at his messages. They're mostly asking where I'm living and saying that he wants to talk things over with me. Lately, I've been so caught up with explaining to my parents about my sudden marriage to Leo and planning the wedding that I had enough and blocked his number. While I was choosing invitation card styles in the wedding studio, an unfamiliar call came through. I answered it, but the other side stayed silent for a long time. Just as I was about to hang up thinking it was a spam call, a low voice came from the speaker. Let's talk. I'm right outside the studio. I went to the second-floor window and saw James standing outside. His hair was messy, and he leaned against the car behind him. It seemed like he felt my gaze because he immediately looked up, our eyes locking for a moment. Leo, noticing my change in expression, asked worriedly, Is there something you need to deal with? I pointed down at James. He wants to talk. Leo glanced at him, then nodded softly, Okay, I'll wait for you. James was visibly excited when he saw me come downstairs. Suppressing his emotions, he wordlessly grabbed my arm and led me to a nearby cafe. It had only been 2 months since we last saw each other, but he looked so much more worn out. The dark circles under his eyes made his face look drained and dull. After a long silence, his first words were, I regret it. He looked guilty. I used to hurt you for people who weren't even worth it. I was such an idiot. After you left, I realized I really can't live without you. I've gotten so used to having you by my side, wherever I am, whenever I need you. Turns out, I've always loved you. I didn't cherish you before. Please come back to me. I promise I'll love you wholeheartedly from now on. I stared at him, expressionless, then remembered the message from a mutual friend. A few days ago, James and Mia had a public argument, and for some reason, he ended up hitting Mia. He even spent a few days in the police station afterward. When he got out, Mia was nowhere to be seen, but he often posted on Instagram, talking about how much he missed me and even sharing pictures of those little couple trinkets I'd once bought. I looked at him coldly and said, Sorry, I can't do it. As I stood up to leave, James grabbed my arm. Are you really going to throw away the years of our relationship so easily? I pried his hand off. You were the one who betrayed me first. I walked out of the cafe without a second glance, only to see Leo standing by the door. I looked at him, confused, and asked, What are you doing here? Leo took my hand with practiced ease and replied, I was worried he'd hurt you. The sincerity in his eyes didn't feel fake. Spending time with him these past weeks, I had felt warmth from him that I had never known before. It was a warmth that came with a sense of familiarity. For a moment, I couldn't tell if he really had no feelings for me at all. Leo noticed I was staring at him blankly. He smiled and gently patted my forehead. What are you thinking about? I was wondering if we had met before. Leo smiled without answering, but the joy in his eyes grew stronger. He changed the subject. When the time is right, I'll tell you everything. For now, let's go deliver the invitations. On the day of the wedding, when my parents learned what James had done to me, they used their long-established reputation in the business world to invite many political and business elites. The wedding was even grander than I had originally planned. They simply wanted to vent their anger on my behalf. When it came time for the ring exchange, James suddenly burst through the doors from somewhere. He had dressed himself up in a well-fitted suit, looking completely different from the man I had seen that day. He gazed at me with deep affection. "He's just a substitute I hired. Don't let him fool you. He has no real feelings for you, and you won't be happy with him after marriage. Please, give me another chance. I'll prove my love for you with my actions." I glared at him coldly, ready to tell the security to throw him out, when a disheveled woman rushed in. She grabbed James by the collar and shouted, "Didn't you say I was the one you loved the most? Come with me. Let's get married." James shoved Mia away in disgust, scowling as he cursed, "You filthy woman who's slept with other men, who's already aborted countless children, and hid these dirty things from me, cheating me out of so much money. You're not worthy of me. Get lost." Mia screamed in madness, "I'm not leaving. I don't believe you really want me to go." She turned her gaze to me. "It's her, isn't it? She's the one seducing him. Filthy bitch. If you die, no one will fight me for James." She suddenly pulled out a fruit knife and lunged toward me. Leo, reacting quickly, grabbed my hand and tried to run, but the long train of my wedding dress tripped me, and I fell to the ground. As I desperately tried to get up, the knife was already in front of me. I froze in place in sheer terror, squeezing my eyes shut. I expected to feel a sharp pain, but after a few seconds, there was nothing. Nervously, I opened my eyes and saw James standing beside me, blocking the knife. The blade was deeply embedded in his shoulder. Mia screamed in anguish, "Why are you saving her?" Before she could finish, a sharp voice rang out, "Freeze! Drop the weapon." The police quickly took control of the scene, putting handcuffs on Mia and rushing James to the hospital. When the police had handled everything, I stood on the stage, looking at the mess that had once been a romantic wedding, feeling a mix of emotions. Leo comforted me, holding my hand. "Don't be sad. This is just an accident in life." Then he suddenly grabbed the microphone. In front of the remaining guests, he knelt before me. Leo looked at me with deep affection. "You once asked me if we had met before. I'm going to answer that question for you now." He pulled a handkerchief from his pocket and held it up to me. "Actually, we met in kindergarten. James wasn't the only one with you throughout your school years. I was there too, hiding in the corner, too shy to speak to you. When you used this handkerchief to wipe the dust off my scraped knee, that was when I fell in love with you. I only worked for James because I didn't want you to get hurt. I've always been sincere with you." Leo gazed at me with love, holding up the diamond ring. "Olivia, will you marry me?" Tears of joy welled up in my eyes as I listened to his words. I thought back to the boy with glasses from my memories. Wiping the tears from my eyes, I choked out, "I do." With the blessings of the crowd, I completed this imperfect but unforgettable wedding. 3 months after the wedding, I heard from a friend that Mia, who had just been released from prison, had gone to find James again. They were having an argument in the street when a runaway train crashed into them, killing both of them instantly. Sitting by my bed, I felt a mix of emotions. I never imagined the person I had loved for over a decade would end up with such a tragic end. End of the story.